andinaxesha lokudlala ndiyava ndoda mna ndiyindoda mna ndiyindoda mna ndiyindoda mna indoda ezimiseleyo indoda enenjongo indoda enebhumba indoda eqinileyo 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 indoda ezimiseleyo indoda enenjongo indoda enebhumba ndiyindoda ndiyindoda mna hayo Greetings. Greetings. This. I am Thandisizwe Chimurenga, and this is week 2 of Black August Study and Struggle. And last week, I came to you from the void, and I'm going to continue to come to you from the void. We're going to focus on the text and not my beautiful, voluptuous face. I don't want y'all to get distracted. Again, this is about study. So how y'all doing this wonderful Sunday afternoon, evening? I hope you're doing well. This is Rootwork coming to you on a Sunday for the month of Black August, as opposed to my usual time, Mondays at 8 p.m. But we're going to do the usual thing, though. We want you to like, share, and subscribe. Like the video now. Go on and get it out the way in case you forget at the end. Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to Black Liberation Media. Become a member. Support the Patreon. This is independent, militant, radical, dare I say revolutionary Black media analysis information. We need your support, so please subscribe. Also, hook a sister up and subscribe to my own Rootwork channel. Also, share the video. Share last week's video. Share the link for this week's video. And share all, after you have digested all of the other offerings that we have here on Black Liberation Media, please be sure to share those links also. How are you doing, Will Red? Hey, David Silberg. Good evening to you. I'm not familiar with you, but glad you're here. Hello there. Hi, Espiritus. Espiritus, I think I've seen your name before. So hello to you. And if I haven't seen your name before, but you're here now, hey, greetings. Welcome, Snowman. Welcome to Brittany. Thank y'all for hanging out with me. Free the land, bam, by any means necessary. Hey, what's up, Caden Saints? How are you today? As I said, hope y'all Onk Uja Saneb. Life. I'm not sure what Uja is. Saneb means health, right? I used to know all of that stuff. Hey, Chitimacha, how you doing today? What's happening? Yeah. Okay, okie dokie. So yeah, last week we dealt with the first two chapters of Sanyika Shakur's. What is the name of his book? Is Stand Up, Struggle Forward? Is it not? I was supposed Stand Up, Struggle Forward. Yes, and I could put. Well, I think I'm going to be able to put the text on the screen today. It looked horrific last week, and y'all just allowed me to read to you, and I appreciate that. But if I can get this text on the screen where it doesn't look that horrific, then you'll be able to read along with me at the same time if you don't have your own access to the copy. So we did the first two chapters of Stand Up, Struggle Forward. Um, Class antagonisms inside the fundamental contradiction of national oppression, and study and struggle and overstanding. Those were the first two chapters. We also did the first two chapters of Safiya Bukhari's um, book, which I think The War Before. I won't be able to put that on the screen just yet. But we did Coming of Age, a Black Revolutionary, and Testimony, Experiences in the Black Panther Party. So today, hopefully, I'm gonna jump right into it. I didn't think we would be here 3 hours last Sunday, but there we were. Hopefully today we're also going to get into two chapters apiece, get up for the downstroke, and on the correct terminology and spellings in Sanyika's book. And then in the next hour, we'll get into Marriage Contract between Safiya Bukhari and Michael Ashanti Alston, and What is Security, and The Ballot or the Bullet Revisited. That is the plan. Not gonna lie, this reading is power. I'm glad I know about the BLM channel. Y'all really them ones. I'm glad you know about us too. And thank you for those kind words. We love you too, Roots and Bark. I've been thinking for a while Tech Spicy should start a reading channel. If you are new here, then let me explain. Tech Spicy is my nickname because I'm always complaining about the various technical glitches and errors that I sometimes commit. And in an effort to be more positive and affirming, just like some people say, neurodivergent for those whose brains think in an alternative or different way. It went from neurodivergent to neurospicy. Folks up here call me tech spicy, and I accept that with love. You just finished it. The book just came out Monday or Tuesday. You finished it already? Dang, I ain't even got my copy yet. I just finished Ashanti Austin's new collection, Anarchist Panther, published by AK Press. It was great. I figured it was great. So as soon as I get a chance, I am going to read that book, and I'm sure somebody will probably on this channel beat me to it and interview him. But I'm also going to try and be in discussion with him and talk about the book, because we've had him on before and we've seen him elsewhere talking about his experiences and what has shaped and molded him, not only up till that point when he was in the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army, but even through to today. So yeah, it should be a good book. Get it if you can. All right, 510. I'm not going to do too much preliminary talking. I want to hold on. David speed reads and puts everyone to shame. Yeah, I wish I knew how to speed read. I don't know how to speed read. Chichimancha says, Stand Up, Struggle Forward. There's a PDF available out there in the world if you search for it. Okay. I let's see. All right. Let us get into chapter uh whatever it is. Get up for the downstroke. Ooh, this just is horrific. This is just horrible. Now there were a couple of pieces. Free range predators is like a poem that he did. I didn't. I skipped right into his actual words. There's an interview of Sanyika in here. I skipped that and got right into his own writings, his own words. So today again we're going to start with. Well, no, we're not going to start with correct terminology and spellings. We're going to start with get up for the downstroke. Let's see. I don't know. How does that look? Well, oh, okay. Hold on. I see it. Wait a minute. Hold it. Hold it. Hold it. Hold it. Share screen. That's what I want. Because I'm like, why are they moving? How come it ain't moving? Yeah, let's get rid of that. Now, hopefully, no, not hopefully. See, when I try to enlarge the screen for myself, which I'm hoping enlarges it for you, then I can't get back to the document to read it. So, once again, y'all just gonna have to bear with me and trust that I'm reading this in your best interest. See, once I go into full screen, I can't get back over here to actually read the document. So maybe y'all can enlarge it on your own, and that way you can read with me. Or you can just listen to my melodious voice. All right, let's get to it. This is chapter 3, Stand Up Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur. Get Up for the Downstroke, a response to Black liberation in the 21st century, a revolutionary reassessment of Black nationalism. Part 1. And again, there are footnotes throughout the book, but I'm not always able to access the footnotes. But here we go. Part 1. There's never been a question for us, only a task, a goal, the struggle to regain our independence as a separate people with interests which oppose those of the empire. A goal for us is a question for those outside the nation who have a different nationality and or for those inside the nation who have a different ideology. E.g., the phrase national question was coined by people trying to determine what position they would take regarding the struggle of colonized peoples. There was never a national question for the colonized themselves. I'm going to go out on a guess here and say that this quote is from James Sales, also known as Yaki, also known as Atiba Shana, um, because Brother Sanyika credits him as being one of his greatest mentors and refers to his writings a lot. If you're just tuning in this week and missed last week, again, this is Black August, and Black August is that time of the year created in the penal system of California by brothers inside, many of them nameless, faceless, unknown, unnamed. But it has been embraced by the new African independence movement. That is that arm of the Black liberation movement that struggles to free what is known as the colonized Black nation in North America. The actual borders of what some consider to be the Black nation, that land being in the Deep South, 5 states of the Deep South, i.e., New Africa. Those of us who adhere to that, we consider ourselves to be New African. So we consider ourselves to be nationalists, revolutionary nationalists. which entails internationalism and Pan-Africanism, socialism, anti-capitalism, etc. So the chapter after this is going to go into terminology and spellings, but in this document, just like in the previous chapters, I'll be referring to all kinds of terms and different things. So that's what the chat is for. Throw in a question. If I don't get to it, somebody else in the chat may or may not answer it. But we're just trying to do what we can while we're up here. All right, shut up. Get back to reading. Sometimes in the course of struggle, whether around theory, philosophy, ideology, or tactics, we get tangled, as it were, in ideas so contradictory and muddled that we hardly have the ability to understand how we reach that point, let alone how to extricate ourselves from it. We'll often allow such confusion to actually become us, or so we think. And then any critique of the confusion is seen as a personal critique of ourselves rather than an honest and revolutionary attempt to disentangle oneself from ideo-theoretical muck and mire. This is one of the things we're confronted by in the New African Black Panther Party prison chapter's position on the so-called national question. I am not familiar with the New African Black Panther Party prison chapter. I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe Kevin Rashid Johnson, who is a political prisoner that his case has been covered before, either is or was a member of that. Again, this book came out in 2013, so some of this stuff is old, but some of it is very, very relevant. All right, keep it moving. What a mind blowing tangle of ideo-theoretical mumbo jumbo this peace position is. Again, this is a response to something, and then within that, to something specific, written in 2013. But you'll be able to find the gems, the knowledge, the information that is timeless within this response. There appears to have been some effort put forth early on to position themselves on an objective plane, for what it's worth, but that evaporated immediately as the tools they were using to excavate the facts faltered and eventually altogether broke apart in the process of their reasoning. The results were a pathetic attempt at continuing on in spite of having not a fact to stand on. We find it a bit odd, or perhaps not so at all, that in the NABPP's piece to supposedly refute or ideologically combat the new African independence movement position on land, specifically our national territory, that they not use one actual quote of a new African revolutionary nationalist. And while at the outset they mention the provisional government of the Republic of New Africa, the PGRNA, the New African People's Organization, NAPO, the New African Maoist Party, NAMP, and the Maoist Internationalist Movement, MIM, they fail to post their positions. What the NABPP does is use everyone except those whose position they are refuting to bolster their position. And throughout their position piece, they do what exactly? They attempt to prove that New Africans are a people without a need for a national territory, a nation within a nation, but requiring no self determination, a nation which, when it exerts its need for land of its own, is somehow separatist and by implication racist, a people who, in order to get free, must wait on and then unite with the citizens of the oppressor nation, and finally, that we are sadly misled by our strategies, which, according to the NABPP, no longer have any basis for existence. Got to come back over here. How y'all doing? Y'all all right over here? Got to check the chat. Oh yeah, look like y'all still there? Did you fall asleep? Hello? Somebody give me a black fist. Or A brown fist. Somebody give me a fist. Do y'all understand the words that is coming out of my mouth? Thank you. All right, let me go on back over here. Of course, in a magnificent feat of ideological gymnastics, they switch at one point and say that Americans are so thoroughly anti New African, citing the response to the Katrina disaster slash strategy of depopulation, that our strategy should be to unite with them to keep things from, quote, almost certainly degenerating into an imperialist sponsored race war, unquote. So, in this baffling projection, those we must unite with to get free are simultaneously those who will, quote, almost certainly, end quote, annihilate us in, quote, an imperialist sponsored race war, end quote. We are not amused in the least by the hodgepodge of ideological, theoretical claptrap in question, nor are we altogether surprised. After all, this is a group called the New African Black Panther Party Prison Chapter. We have always been struck by this, since it is such a redundancy, such an obvious ripoff and regrafting of, well, we'll save that for another time. Let's go on and get into the quicksand mess of this position and work our way through in the hopes of this being a teachable moment. And while we'd like to think that this would help disentangle the NABPP from its muddle, we seriously doubt that will be the case, since it never really seemed to want struggle with the new African independence movement on this point, only against us. As we carry on, we too will use quotes, passages, and points of authority to frame certain things or to flesh out positions, though we will use those best qualified to inform the arguments we use. We won't go get Chairman Mao to instruct us on New African social development. While we do in fact revere Chairman Mao and have always studied the works of the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Revolution, we feel it best to use our own ideologues to make our own points. And we most certainly will not be using anything from old imperialist Stalin. He may be looked upon as a, quote, comrade, unquote, by the NABPP, but not by us. We open this response with a quote by Comrade Brother Owusu Yaki Yakubu. Again, that's also Atiba Shana or James Sales, an erstwhile member of the coordinating committee of the Black Liberation Army, the New African Prisoners Organization, the Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa, and of the Spear and Shield Collective. And yes, that's two different organizations. The New African Prisoners Organization, which I believe is defunct, and the New African People's Organization, which is still around. Comrade Brother Yaki is perhaps one of our keenest ideologues and theoreticians, and will be quoted at length here, for it was some of his contributions, along with those of other comrades in the PGRNA and NAPO, New African Prisoners Organization, that were largely responsible for kickstarting the resurgence. Well, then again, it may have been the other NAPO that were largely responsible for kickstarting the resurgence of the Naim today. Their words and ideas are as worthy as Chairman Mao is to us. We had taken for granted that the NABPPC was an organization in the Naim, which is what I call the New African Independence Movement, Naim, because it uses in its name our national identity. We overstand and do to a great extent anticipate that our national identity, New African, will take root and evolve into the dominant name used by our people. I hope, because this FBA and ADOS is killing me. We feel this because it is a correct idea that projects our aspirations. And with the mass usage of this will eventually inevitably come various class divisions and aspirations. It's much like when in the early and mid 1960s, the Young Black Liberation Movement, as led by Malcolm X and the Revolutionary Action Movement, RAM, began to use black in place of Negro to symbolize and embody not only an objective change in external projection, but also a subjective change of internal dynamics, which is to say, the BLM, Black Liberation Movement, was decidedly nationalist and about self determination, while it saw the civil rights movement as integrationist, bourgeois nationalist, and neo colonial. Though Malcolm would always make the distinction between a black person and a Negro, he'd also let the people know that they shouldn't be fooled by the term Negro and that it was, in fact, a colonialist manufactured tool. Thus, he'd always say, quote, the so called Negro, unquote. That is, so called by the oppressor and then used by the unknowing colonial subjects and or by the aware collaborators to realize their class interests. Eventually, the term Negro got phased out as the black masses exerted themselves and demanded to be dealt with on terms of their own deciding. Of course, it goes without saying, I thought I had turned this down. Sorry, that's my phone. Though Malcolm would, hold on, where's it at? Of course, it goes without saying that while it was at that time in our social development necessary to distinguish black nationalists from Negro integrationists as a sense of coming into our own, it wasn't sufficient. It wasn't a politically or ideologically sound platform to stand on or from which to launch and sustain a national liberation revolution. I use the word Negro today when I'm trying to make a distinction in terms of somebody who's what I consider to be reactionary, which is different from not knowing, being ignorant of something. Just somebody who, hmm, oh, okay, sorry. Thought I had it on Do Not Disturb. Somebody who is knowingly taking the opposite position, either because it's in their class interest or because they just being an ass and want to be a contrarian. I'll say Negro or Negroidal. Those are the words I use. Anyway, back to the lecture at hand. The first people using the radical term black were, by and large, about essentially the same thing, a sense of self, separate of and determined by our own internal dynamics and informed by objective reality in a dialectical materialist way. National liberation struggles were raging all across the planet, so as things were perceived at that particular time and in that space, black was an idea whose time had come. We are approaching that time now in our consciousness. The masses of all the internal and external colonies are beginning to stir. Settlers and citizens of the oppressor nations, those in the metropole, are beginning to stir as well. Prisoners across the empire are in the early stages of unity and rebellion again, as focus is trained on ways to get free. And this is but the beginning. Thus, when we saw this organization, the NABPPPC, come onto the scene and read bits and pieces of its work here and there, we instinctively mistook their usage of New African to mean they were a revolutionary nationalist group aligned with the constellation of organizations within the Naim. Because you see, to call oneself New African at this early stage is to be by and large about what we in the Naim are about: land, independence, and socialism. What we find, however, with the publishing of its position on the so called, quote, national question, end quote, is that it's really about a, quote, multi ethnic, multiracial, socialist America, end quote, i.e., radical integration. In other words, it does not see the People's Center Council of the Provisional Government, the People's Revolutionary Leadership Council, New African Security Forces, etc., as the state in exile of the Republic of New Africa. It is not sworn to the Code of Umoja, which is the New African National Constitution. It has no pledge to the New African Creed, nor does it recognize the New African Declaration of Independence. And we know this because these are the official documents, instruments that we in the Naim stand on and utilize to realize our national independence struggle for self determination and liberation of our national territory in Kush, i.e., New Africa. And yes, I do see, I do realize, I do understand, or as Sanyika would say, overstand, the glaring parallels with that of the American Empire, as in a Declaration of Independence, or a Constitution, or a government, provisional government, etc. At some point, we'll deal with all that. But again, this came about in 1968. That's when all of this came about. It had been in gestation for a few years before that. But in March of 1968, at that Black Power convention, that is when the founding of the Republic of New Africa came into being. So we're talking about, what is it, 58 years ago? For us, as Comrade Brother Yaki so eloquently stated, there was never a national question. That, he said, was for those inside the nation who have a different ideology. We thought that by the NABPPPC calling itself New African, that it was in compliance with Article 1, Section 7 of the Code of Umoja, which states, and we quote, all citizens of the Republic of New Africa who are aware of their citizenship are conscious New African citizens. Though, to be fair, in Section 7, Article 1 is preceded by Section 1. Each African person born in America is a citizen of the Republic of New Africa. And Section 2, any child born to a citizen of the Republic of New Africa is a citizen of the Republic of New Africa. In other words, if you born black in America, we consider you to be New African. You might not consider yourself to be New African, i.e., you are not a conscious citizen of the Republic of New Africa. But if you calling yourself New African, if you are familiar with the Code of Umoja and you accept it, or if you have taken the New African Creed, all of these different things, you are considered to be. And I'm not saying it's required. I'm just saying, like, for example, if you know about NAPO, MXGM, the PGRNA, and yeah, I'm down with that, I'm a New African, you're a conscious New African. It doesn't mean you have had to read and digest and memorize the Code of Umoja or the Declaration of Independence. Those things come later. So there's conscious New African, and then there's quote unquote unconscious New African. Those are where he just said it. Those are where we call conscious citizens. Those not knowing are referred to as unconscious citizens. The unconscious citizens never use New African because they are as of yet unaware of it. So this is how we got confused by the NABPPPC. Section 3 of Article 1 says, any person not otherwise a citizen of the Republic of New Africa may become a citizen of the Republic of New Africa by completing the procedures for naturalization as provided by the People's Center Council. Yuri Kochiyama was a citizen of the Republic of New Africa. She took the oath of citizenship and became a citizen of the Republic of New Africa. We'll come back to Article 1, Section 3 of the Code of Umoja as we go on to combat the NABPP's distortion of the Naim as, quote, black separatists, unquote. Though, as anyone can see by the first line of Section 3, this can't be the case. But let's move on. Dig this. Who are we, those of us who built a national black prisoners organization? There is much evidence to show that as each day passes, more and more black prisoners identify themselves as New Africans and work on behalf of the New African independence movement. Despite the questions many of us may raise concerning them, two of the things which define our movement and guide it are the New African Declaration of Independence and the New African Creed. Our Declaration of Independence states in part that we, in consequence of our inextinguishable determination to go a different way, to build a new and better world, do hereby declare ourselves free and independent of the jurisdiction of the United States of America and the obligations which that country's unilateral decision to make our ancestor and ourselves paper citizens placed on us. Again, jumping in here real quick, as I stated last week when talking about who Safiya Bukhari was, she and her co-defendant Masai Ehihosi were the first to stand up in court and say, "We are New Africans. You have no jurisdiction to try us." It's the same thing Kuwasi Balagoon said. It's the same thing Mutulu Shakur said. It's the same thing Imari Obadele said. Same thing Sekou Odinga said. You do not have jurisdiction. We reject your jurisdiction. That's what they are saying. When we pledge ourselves to the New African Creed, we do so with the belief that, quote, the fundamental reason our oppression continues is that we as a people lack the power to control our lives, end quote, and that the fundamental way to gain that power and end oppression is to build a sovereign black nation. We are guided by the strategic objective of winning sovereignty for our nation, to build a new socialist society, and to support and wage the world revolution until all people everywhere are so free. That's from the New African Declaration of Independence. If an organization is to be built by those who identify themselves as New African, whether a national black prisoners organization or a national and or local black students or tenant organization, it must rest on a foundation of the New African Declaration of Independence and the New African Creed. These are integral parts of our ideal framework, and it's upon this foundation that all else rests, unity included. So I am again popping back over here. Make sure y'all is, because again, I've got two different screens, unfortunately. Look like y'all all right over there in the chat. So I'm going to keep it moving. The national question. Let's fall into the NABPP's position on the so-called, quote, national question, end quote, which is really not what the piece is actually about, because the national question, as originally debated, was primarily about whether New Africans actually comprised a nation within a nation here. The NABPP concedes that we do, in fact, comprise a nation within the political borders of the empire. That's another term that we'll probably get into in the next section. The New African Independence Movement and other national liberation movements consider the United States to be an empire. That's not their beef. Their beef boils down to whether we actually are sound in our struggle for land in the national territory. Our efforts to free the land are critiqued, while in the same breath, the NABPPPC advocates the taking of all the land in the empire for a multi ethnic, multiracial, socialist America, essentially a new and improved, i.e., reformed, America. This so called reassessment of black nationalism, to use their subtitle, is nothing more than their propagation of radical integration in drag as a deepened version of Huey P. Newton's analysis on intercommunalism. The facts of this will easily bear out as we go forward. Pay close attention. Their position paper on the so called national question could very well have been titled, quote, "The Nation That Needs No Land," unquote, or, quote, "Soon Whitey Comes to Help," end quote. At times, it's actually that pitiful in its shameless, hat in hand plea for oppressor nation citizens to save the day. In one astounding admission of blind hope and childlike idealism, they say that uniting with settler radicals is a step towards uniting all of humanity and the whole world becoming one people. But let us not get ahead of ourselves here. We must proceed with caution because this can really raise consciousness. The opening shots are fired at the Black Belt Thesis, or BBT, as developed by Harry Haywood, who was first a member of the African Blood Brotherhood and then of the Settler Communist Party USA. In fact, the whole African Blood Brotherhood, or ABB, was incorporated into the CPUSA, which effectively liquidated the first actual New African Communist organization. Now, Sanyika says up above, one of many points the NABPP fails to mention in this piece being that Harry Haywood developed the Black Belt Thesis as a member of the African Blood Brotherhood. He says this is called deception by omission. Now we have a quote. It was founded in 1919, the African Blood Brotherhood, at the same time as the first Vietnamese communist study groups and the Chinese Communist Party. Yet some 40 years later, in a new generation of struggle, New Africans once again face the necessity of building a communist center from ground zero. Why, in fact, was this that in the 1960s, New Africans had to start building a communist center from ground zero? Because our first communist organization found it expedient to unite in the same organization and under its leadership with settlers who did not share our national interests, no matter what they said to the contrary. I.e., when they refer to settlers, they're basically talking about white folks, the white working class, i.e., settlers of the colonial empire, the white citizens of the United States of America. Harry Haywood's so called black belt thesis was doomed from the outset, and here's why. We can say that, whether knowingly or not, the CPUSA served the interests of U.S. imperialism by one, leading the oppressed away from armed struggle, away from joining the world revolution, two, convincing people that national liberation and communism were opposed to each other, three, using third world communists to disunite the oppressed nations, such as New Africa, or Puerto Rico, or Hawaii, or Aslan, the southwest portion of the United States, while also placing the activities of the oppressed under constant monitoring and meddling of Euro Americans. Quote, left, unquote, settlerism worked as a counter revolutionary police for the empire, and their most loyal third world communists become unconscious traitors to their own people. The term black belt entered the national lexicon, however, and came to denote the actual contiguous strain of New African dominated counties, 50 in all, that stretched from the Louisiana Delta to the Atlantic Ocean. But Harry Haywood's BBT, Black Belt Thesis, played but a small nominal part in our later designation in 1968 of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina as the New African National Territory. We didn't need no BBT to inform us where our nationals were, where we labored, fought, died, and buried our ancestors. We knew where, quote, down home was. The NABPP, New African Black Panther Party Prison Chapter, fails to mention the small fact that the reason the 1960s revolutionary struggle produced nationalism and separatism is because the masses of oppressed in the struggle themselves demanded it and wouldn't have it any other way. It wasn't because Harry Haywood's writing was reprinted in 1979 or because someone got an idea about black ideological nationalism, saying that is complete BS, only oppressor thinking. It was all those in struggle themselves who demanded political separation, who forced white civil rights workers out of the movement, who started all New African initiatives, projects, and organizations. This surge was particularly sharp because of the years of bitter experience, which led to activists becoming tired of Euro-settler leftists and liberals intervening in their relationships, manipulating them, lying to them, attempting to stay their rulers with honeyed words and money. Talk about neocolonialism. There it was. Gotta take a quick. Hold on. Well, I tell you, technology. Hold on 1 second. Need to take a quick swig of my juice without gin. Hold on. Got to lubricate the vocal cords. I have referred to in the past in other broadcasts, and let me refer to it now. You need to read Robert L. Allen's Reluctant Reformers if you haven't read it. Robert L. Allen, one of the founders or founding editors of the Black Scholar. Reluctant Reformers. And he chronicles and documents some of the major social economic reform movements that took place in the United States and how all of them, every single last one of them, fell apart or did not achieve its aims because of white racism. And that's from within the organization, white racist members. CPUSA liquidating the entire black belt thesis, making all the black folks run for cover because it was said that the CPUSA abandoned black struggle here in the U.S. It's the influence. What does he say? Euro settler leftists and liberals intervening in their relationships, manipulating them, lying to them, blah 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 blah. It's the same reason you have black women who will very loudly, with their whole chest, say, "I am a feminist, but I ain't messing with them white girls. I ain't messing with white women." It's being in close quarters in organizations with white folks that have stayed many black folks from these exact for these exact reasons. When people talk about a multiracial working class, a lot of black folks grown be like, "Oh, you talking about white folks? We ain't down with the white folks," because the white left has been problematic. They don't mind uniting with Asians, with other Latinos, but the white left has a problem. When Jay Sakai, and I forgot the other brother's name, it's Jay Sakai, Sakai, and I've forgotten the other one, but it's two books that talk about the myth of the white working class. That's a heavy statement, denouncement that there really is no white working class, that y'all are just members of the empire whose role is to be a buffer between black folks, the black working class, and black folks in general. You work for white supremacy. You're not a working class. But I digress. Let me hush. Y'all all right over there? Sound like Jill Scott. Y'all all right? Drink gin for those who can. No, I just needed orange juice. I just needed something and I didn't want water. Where is this thing? But again, we contend that the NABPP's attack on this position is but a smokescreen masking their true intent. We notice the ideological deficiencies bleeding through almost immediately, as the NABPP can't seem to decide whether we as a people are New Africans or blacks. It slips easily back and forth in a dizzying array of theoretical schizophrenia as it attempts to discredit the land requirement slash objective of the Naim with old tenets which actually have nothing to do with us. We think the NABPP is studying other material and heaping its analysis of that work onto us. Had the NABPP been studying the body of work produced by cadres of the Naim, they'd have known early on that our struggle for national liberation, land independence, and socialism has nothing to do with any black belt thesis, Harry Haywood, or the CPUSA Comintern, Communist International. We don't import ideas, and while the NABPP calls its position paper Black Liberation in the 21st Century, a revolutionary reassessment of black nationalism, we in the Naim reassessed so-called black nationalism in the 20th century. The exhaustion of so-called black nationalism was done with the collapse of the black liberation movement and reassessed in a scientific manner as the new African independence movement. We are not black nationalists. We are not about black liberation. We are revolutionary new African nationalists, and we are about new African independence, land, and socialism. Had the NABPP been studying our material, they'd have easily known this. We don't base our struggle on the false social construction of race or color. We are anti-racists. At one point in this so-called revolutionary reassessment, the NABPP calls the Naim the black movement, a deliberate distortion of our struggle. We resent this. We are the ones who led the ideological struggle for the usage of New African as our national identity over black as a racial identity. Black identity, i.e., nationality, over black as a racial identity. In fact, check out the wise words of Comrade Brother Yaki. The deconstruction of race as a concept and the struggle against racism on the political front starts by understanding politics as everything related to our lives and not just those things related to the electoral arena. More precisely, we can define politics as a concentrated expression of economics concerned with the acquisition, retention, and use of state power, which is used to realize revolutionary interests of society. Politically, the deconstruction of race attacks the cause and seeks to prevent the use of race to disguise it. The Naim is not about black nationalism as the NABPP mistakenly postulates, and it is precisely because we are not about black nationalism or an ambiguously defined liberation that for us there is no national question, nor is there one pertaining to a requirement for land. We are a nation. Nations require land to administer the needs of their nationals. It's not a complicated thing, really. National reality. We call into question the material tools the NABPP is using to make its revolutionary reassessment, since it appears to us that they are hardly talking about New Africans. For instance, they refer to colonized New Africans as a quote rural peasantry unquote. This is a term used by Russian and Chinese comrades when describing their nationals in their assessment of their people. Another ill fitting graft is tied onto New African social development in order to disguise the obvious weak points and glaring errors in perception. There was no feudalism here. The NABPP says, quote, the black population, when the U.S. is no longer a rural peasantry, it is overwhelmingly a proletarian nation, wage slaves, dispersed across the U.S. and concentrated in and around urban centers in predominantly black or multi ethnic oppressed communities. Aside from the ideological muddle of terms like black and multi ethnic, as if this were Yugoslavia or worse, one United States with just a few multi ethnics inside, the NABPP totally misses the boat on the fact that colonized Africans who evolved into new Africans here were stolen to be used as a permanent proletariat. The new African nation was born as a working class nation of permanent proletarians. The fact that we weren't paid does not preclude the fact that we were workers. What do they think so called slavery, colonialism, entails if not work? Quote, Africans were the landless, propertyless, permanent workers of the U.S. empire. They were not just slaves. The African nation as a whole served as a proletariat for the Euro American oppressor nation. The African colony supported on its shoulders the building of Euro American society, more prosperous, more egalitarian, and yes, more democratic than any in semi feudal old Europe. America imported a proletariat from Africa, a proletariat permanently chained in an internal colony, laboring for the benefit of all settlers. African workers might be individually owned, like tools and draft animals, by some settlers and not others, but in their colonial subjugation, they were as a whole owned by the entire Euro American nation. Whew, I'm not going to reread that one, but that's one that need to be reread. The NABPP says we were dispersed across the U.S., and it is in fact this dispersal out of the national territory, out of the national territory that they go on to use as their basis for our requirement of land being outmoded. That the so-called black belt thesis, in parentheses, which we don't use, is no longer relevant because we no longer make up the majority in the national territory. What a shallow analysis. Yeah, this is really a deepened analysis here, huh? There are more Irish people in the US than there are in Ireland. Does this mean they have no claim to or need for a national territory? And what of the Kanaka Maoli, the indigenous of Hawaii, who've been drastically decimated by settlerism to the point where they are but a fraction of their former selves? What of the Basque? Our migration out of the national territory and into America was akin to any other oppressed people who, having their own territory mangled and ravished by encroaching capitalism, went in search of sustenance, worked to feed, clothe, and house themselves, to feel safe and stable, to survive in the trade winds of a hostile imperialism. We came up out of the national territory as refugees, much like Mexicanos and other destitute peoples from South and Central America who have been NAFTA'd into mass migrations for survival. Our nationals, too, sent our nationals too sent remittances back home to family members still in the cush, i.e., down south. We still listened to down home blues or southern gospel, had fish fries, and did what we do while in America. And our parents would send us home for the summer to be with Big Mama, Nana, Aunt Lily, and our cousins who never left the national territory. Our nationals who left to go up north, back east, and out west, they were fugitives. Excuse me, some of them were fugitives. They were refugees, those who migrated from the national territory during World War I and World War II years. Our elders were refugees during the years of the Black Codes when they fled the national territory. The cities of America were full of new African refugees who entered them during the 30s and 40s, escaping the Klan and the Southern prison. One step ahead of the hounds, a few minutes ahead of the lynch mob, is how many new Africans came north, refugees from the national territory. I guarantee you, I guarantee you, every black person or new African, we're gonna stick with black for expediency. Every black person, if you hearing my voice, if you're not black, every black person you know, search their family, and you will find someone who ran up out of the South, either for economic reasons or for other reasons. They was gonna kill somebody, they was about to be killed, they was about to be raped, couldn't get no job, economic terrorism, etc. Everybody got a story. I guarantee. The NABPP claims to have deepened the analysis put forward by Huey P. Newton of the original Black Panther Party. They also claim to have reached this, quote, deepened state by employing the philosophical tools of dialectical materialism. Surprisingly, we too have used these same philosophical tools to reach our conclusions on the land issue, which can easily stand up in objective reality, the criterion of truth. While the NABPP claims to have deepened the analysis by Huey P. Newton, there certainly appears to be, sorry, hold on, y'all, hold on. I'm sorry, hold on. Okay. There certainly appears to be no such deepening of any such analysis in this position paper. If anything, it's a distortion of Huey Newton's analysis and a grafting on of non applicable realities that point more to confusion than to any real breakthrough or deepened analysis. Seriously, is it deeper that we are a nation within a nation? Or is it deeper that they are referring to empire builder Stalin as comrade? Is it deeper that new Africans are referred to as a rural peasantry? Or is it deeper that black nationalism is no longer applicable? Is it deeper that Euro Americans are said to be the key to the liberation of humanity and the whole world becoming one people? Wake us up when it really gets deep, will you? The NABPP is attempting to view new African social development through the socio-political lens of 1930s China or 1940s Russia. Instead of critically applying the tools of dialectical materialism to reach the truth as it is, they are blowing dialectical materialist smoke while lazily placing over the top of New Africa, vis-a-vis the US empire, a Chinese or Russian political lens. What's being touted as a philosophical conclusion, reached through the application of dialectical materialism, is actually a slow witted political graft. We know this because not one thing in this excuse Not one thing in this whole piece is new or the result of any deepened analysis. The NABPP says that our struggle for the national territory is hopelessly wrong, or as they put it, outmoded ideas and formulations that no longer fit the current situation. Let me stop for a minute. I'm not sure how many more pages. Lord have mercy. That's one, two, three, four, five. We got five more pages. It is currently 6 minutes after the hour. I am not going to get to the second chapter today because that would push us way, way back, and I would not be able to give due or good time to Safiya. So we probably only going to get to one chapter of Sanyika today. So I'm going to try and get through these next five pages, and then let's go to Safiya. Real quick, how y'all doing? How y'all doing? I am looking at the comments. I guess I'm still okay. Look like y'all all right. Y'all don't need me. Let me hush. When did a national territory, the land base of a nationality, become outmoded? They say this, then go right along to say it's necessary to lead a multi ethnic, multiracial struggle for a socialist America. Where? On the moon? No, on this land. A national territory. Dig. Watch your step, please. The inconsistencies and contradictions are all over the place. There is some idealism going on here, but it's wholly manufactured and promoted by the NABPP. Again, he wrote this 13 years ago. And it would be good to utilize it as a framework for whatever new formation or tendency comes along to really analyze what are you saying? What are you liquidating? And what are you holding up and why? The NABPP, when compiling this position paper, would have fared much better, we think, in reaching this so called deepened analysis had they studied our, i.e., New Africans, social development as documented by cadres of the New African Independence Movement. We have a vast body of ideo-theoretical work. We are reminded here of a masterstroke of constructive criticism delivered to the reactionary African People's Socialist Party, APSP, on practically the same points we now find the NABPP postulating by Comrade Brother Chokwe Lumumba, chairman of the New African People's Organization. Truly a teachable learning moment. We feel the NABPP would do well to check the actual foundations upon which the Naim stands before venturing to critique us based on what's believed to be our position from the 1930s. National liberation or radical integration. If you look on here on the playlist for Black Liberation Media, you'll see an interview I did with Walter Riley, long-term organizer, activist, came through the communist movement, and the father of Boots Riley. And he takes issue with folks who characterize the civil rights movement as a movement for integration or quote unquote radical integration. I'm not going to attempt to repeat what he said. I'm not going to jack up his words by attempting to repeat what he said. Go press play and watch it for yourself. Okay. National liberation or radical integration. The whole title of the NABPP's position paper is a false flag distortion of what's actually on the table here. Well, either that or the NABPP is simply dull. Black liberation in the 21st century, a revolutionary reassessment of black nationalism. That's the whole title. Pretty lofty. Pretty lofty, huh? The thing is, though, the NABPP uses the word black perhaps over 22 times in describing New Africans, who they claim to recognize as a nation. So this would mean that it's a black nation? So in their revolutionary reassessment of black nationalism, they can't seem to extricate themselves or deepen their analysis enough to stop using the socially constructed binary terms of race? Watch your step, please. See, this is what we mean about a false flag, a distortion. It's not now, nor has it really ever been, about a real revolutionary reassessment of black nationalism. No, this is about radical integration, which of course is not new and is certainly not the result of a deepened analysis. Let us share something that we laid out back in 1988. In terms of reorientation, the movement must adjust to objective reality and establish new principles or to reinforce old ones. For instance, we ain't calling ourselves a civil rights movement or an ambiguously defined black power or black liberation movement. We ain't adopting lines from the CPUSA and saying we're going to form united fronts against fascism, which the BPP did under the leadership of Huey Newton and Bobby Seale. Nor are we adopting lines from the Trots, meaning the Trotskyists, and saying we're going to establish a black dictatorship in America. The line for this stage says we're waging a new African national liberation revolution, i.e., it's a struggle for national independence and socialism. The NABPP is posturing as if it is somehow involved in some great new debate about the insufficiency of black nationalism as a strategy for freedom. It further propagates this erroneous subtitle of a revolutionary reassessment as if it has somehow made a, quote, miraculous breakthrough, unquote, a great leap forward in some deepened analysis about why our position on the national territory is outmoded. Why, in fact, we need no land, even though we are a nation. You want to know really how new this is? This is what Pig President Thomas Jefferson said, as offered by Professor Peter S. Onuff. Explosive P. Pig President, as opposed to Professor Peter. He did know with as much certainty as his own experience and observation could authorize that new African slaves constituted a distinct nation. The crimes against slaves, therefore, had to be understood first in national terms. Virginia slaves were a people without a country, a captive nation. Not only had we become a distinct nation, but we had human rights as well. And with the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution in 1865, we'd been given land under Field Order Number 15. But this was too much like right. So at the same time as New Africa was granted its freedom with the 13th Amendment, the imperialists doubled back on us and made the unilateral, i.e., single without our consent, decision to make us paper citizens. That is, citizens on paper only, with the 14th Amendment. This amendment reversed Field Order Number 15, which gave us land for a free nation, and with it they said essentially, now you don't need any separate land for yourselves. You're citizens, all this land is yours. And if you remember, our black shining prince, Malcolm X, told us if you was an American, you wouldn't need all these laws and amendments and various civil rights legislation. And this is what the NABPP is saying as well. While it claims to recognize that New Africans are a distinct nation, it advocates that we forego any struggle for our own land, for self-determination in a socialist Republic of New Africa, and that instead we should unite with the settler citizens like the liquidated African Blood Brotherhood did, and struggle in a multi-ethnic, multiracial way for a socialist America. Radical integration, we repeat, is not new. Contrary to the erroneous claim by the NABPP about our struggle for land being based on the Black Belt thesis of Harry Haywood, we have to say that we stand firm instead on the precepts of the New African Creed, number 7. I believe in the Malcolm X doctrine that we must organize upon this land and hold a plebiscite to tell the world by vote that we are free and the land independent, and that after the vote, we must stand ready to defend ourselves, establishing the nation beyond contradiction. That's from the People Center Council. Changes to Changes approved May 5th, 1991. Remember, Malcolm said revolutions are based on land and revolution is bloody. That's what he said. That's what he told us. So, when people talk about the Malcolm X doctrine, that's what they're talking about. There's nothing in our documents about any BBT or Harry Haywood. Here's the thing: America is a prison house of nations, and no matter how much distortion is applied to this reality, it ain't going away. This is an empire. It is as much an empire as Stalin's USSR, the United Soviet Socialist Republics, was. Whole nations are submerged under the grand illusion of a United States, just as it was under the grand illusion of a union of Soviet socialist republics. I think I said that. Anyway, people people we never knew existed were under there, denied their national independence, subjugated, colonized, and politically distorted. And here we find in this piece the NABPP saying national liberation has therefore proved empty of substance to oppress third world peoples, absent the defeat of imperialism, just as it would in a struggle for new African national liberation in the southern U.S. territory, absent the defeat of imperialism. Moreover, any such struggle would almost certainly degenerate into an imperialist sponsored race war, similar to what went down in the Kosovo conflict. We're not altogether sure why they chose to put liberation in scare quotes, since the word alone only means freedom and carries no political connotations. But that's pretty indicative of this whole so-called reassessment position. The lack of consciousness is evident here, where they begin by saying national liberation has therefore proved empty. Now, forgive us if we seem a little slow here on the uptake, but what, we wonder, would be the result of leading the whole working class, as the NABPP says in another part of this piece, and the broad masses in pulling down the capitalist imperialist system and achieving social justice for all, if not national liberation. It would be national liberation of, for, a multi ethnic, multiracial, socialist America. And that, dear reader, is the rub: radical integration. Pay lip service to new Africans being a nation, but actively block our struggle for self determination while promoting a multi ethnic, multiracial socialist America. Stalin, whom the NABPP refers to as Comrade J.V. Stalin, would be proud. Hey, and if the submerged nations begin to struggle, you all can simply exile us someplace, right? Since when has fighting for national liberation become empty to third world people? Did the ETA get that memo? I'm not sure if the ETA is in the Basque separatist movement or liberation movement. I'm not sure where they are, but y'all can look them up. Google is our friend. We in the New African People's Liberation Army sure as hell didn't. We don't think the EZLN or Macheteros got that one either. Here's the thing: there are two types of nationalism: revolutionary nationalism and bourgeois nationalism. Check out what Huey Newton himself had to say. Quote, same thing. There are two kinds of nationalism: revolutionary nationalism and reactionary nationalism. Revolutionary nationalism is dependent upon a people's revolution, with the end result being the people in power. Therefore, to be a revolutionary nationalist, you would by necessity have to be a socialist. If you are a reactionary nationalist, you are not a socialist, and your goal is the oppression of the people. The Naim is a revolutionary nationalist movement. Our nationality is New African. Our nation is called the Republic of New Africa. Our national territory lies in the southeast quadrant of North America. Ours is a war of national liberation. That's our get down: land, independence, and socialism. So, in spite of the NABPP posturing against our revolutionary nationalism, they are nationalists themselves. They just want a socialist America, still a nation of a multi ethnic, multiracial character. That's called radical integration. Let's be clear: for the whole third world, the NABPP has reached the conclusion that, quote, national liberation is empty of substance, absent the defeat of imperialism, end of quote. We better hurry and get this memo out to all the third world national liberation struggles. No use in trying. It's not going to work. Go home. You haven't a chance in hell. See how crazy that sounds? We can't make this stuff up, folks. Next section, the oppressor nation. I see Zen has taken over the chat. I think. Or maybe I'm looking at some old. Okay, the oppressor nation. As we said before, the US is an empire under which is submerged many nations, both internally and externally. The US casts its paw over the lives of millions in a neo-colonial relationship so refined and perfected that the masses themselves eagerly campaign for and work in support of their own oppression, all to the squealing delight of the bourgeoisie and the settler citizens of the empire, who have always been loyal to their ruling class against all forms of struggle, which genuinely push for real revolutionary change, are right there with them, reaping the benefits of empire. Uh, I just had it and it left me again. I was trying to remember the name last week and I just remembered it and left it. It left me again. Gromsky. Oh, Lord have mercy. Getting old. The memory is gone. Antonio Gramsci, Prison Notebooks, his concept of hegemony. Got to deal with that, got to talk about it. Maybe we should have a reading session, study and struggle session on Gramsci's Prison Notebooks. Stop coming up with new work, Tandy. Okay. The settlers don't mark their wealth by the accumulation of ideas. That's fool's gold to them. They got their freedom, or so they think, which is arguable. They ain't going to unite with a movement that puts their things in jeopardy. The NABPP can run from suburb to suburb trying to organize some multi ethnic, multiracial mass, and they'll be debating with IRA accounts, 401ks, car notes, and retirement plans. What better lives could the settlers hope for? Their bread is buttered on the side that holds loyalty to the empire. This has proven true, even of the settlers calling themselves communists. Uh-oh. The CPUSA has a sickening history of collaboration with empire against oppressed nations. False nationalism and false internationalism are not new phenomena. We are not against alliances with genuine revolutionaries, and we are internationalists. However, we are realistic as well. The 26th of July movement had to liberate Cuba before Cuba could become the internationalist contributor it is today. We know that the greatest contribution to internationalism, world revolution, is the primary struggle of self determination. of national liberation. Quote, we all know that the United States is an oppressor nation, that is, a nation that oppresses other nations. This is a characteristic that the U.S. shares with other imperialist powers. What is, what is specific, in particular, about the U.S. oppressor nation is that it is an illegitimate nation. What pretends to be one continental nation stretching from the Atlantic to the Pacific is really a Euro American settler empire built on colonially oppressed nations and peoples whose very existence has been forcibly submerged. But the colonial crime, the criminals, the victims, and the stolen lands and labor still exist. The many Indian nations, the new African nation in the south, Puerto Rico, the northern half of Mexico, Asian Hawaii, all are now considered the lands of the Euro American settlers. The true citizens of this U.S. empire are the European invaders and their descendants. So that the United States is in reality not one, but many nations, oppressor and oppressed. We see the recognition of America as a prison house of nations, as the beginning, no more, no less, of the differences between revisionist and communist politics here. We hold that once this outward shell of integration into a single white dominated USA is cracked open to reveal the colonial oppression and anti colonial struggle within, then the correct path to a communist understanding of the U.S. empire is begun. From self doubt to denial. The colonial mentality is insidious. Is it insidious or insidious? The colonial mentality is insidious insofar as it blinds its victims with a dual sense of self inadequacy. On the one hand, making the target people feel and believe that they, in fact, have no means by which to stand up, shake off, and destroy the malady of oppression, and on the other hand, that only the colonizing culture, its people included, have the answers, ability, and means to solve any and all problems. The colonial mentality is the 2.0 version of what we used to call the slave mentality. It's a new and improved means of control, destruction, and self destruction. Wilson Good, mayor of Philly, who green-lighted the bombing of the move home on May 13th, 1985, 2.0 version. Clarence Thomas, one of the U.S. conservative supremes, 2.0. Rock bottom, who Sanyika calls Barack Obama rock bottom. Presidential frontman for the U.S. ruling class, 2.0. But these are the obvious ones, too easy to point out and light up. What of, what of those who are so thoroughly imbued by a sense of self inadequacy that they'd campaign for us to integrate our struggle, the only thing that we have maintained control over, into the so called workers' movement? Because they say this, quote, is a step towards the total liberation of humanity and the whole world becoming one people, unquote. Can't you just hear Louis Armstrong crooning with that toothy grin? What a wonderful world. Damn, Louis Armstrong catching strays. Moreover, says the NABPP, any such struggle for national territory would almost certainly degenerate into an imperialist sponsored race war, similar to what went down in Kosovo. Cut the Louis Armstrong and cue the DMX, who we be. This is where basic logic, let alone political or revolutionary consciousness, begins to fly completely apart from its center. What the NABPP is miserably failing to realize is that colonialism is an imperialist sponsored race war now. It was won when the Euros invaded Africa, South America, Asia, and North America. You think not? Ask the remnants of genocided peoples. Did not Frantz Fanon say colonialism is a violent process? We use the words nation and nationalities to differentiate peoples and cultures because we know that there really is no, quote, plurality of races, unquote, on the planet. However, this usage of words doesn't necessarily alter, in fact, cannot alter, the fact that 13% of this planet are people of European descent, and the other 87% are peoples from Africa, South America, North America, and Asia, or those considered of color. Yet the minority, who just, quote, happens to be, unquote, from Europe, control the globe to their benefit and our demise. Oh, there's a race war going on, all right, but the colonial mentality has blinded some people behind a curtain of semantics, which present the obvious conclusions from being drawn. Either that or, he leaves off what the or is. Here's the thing, it has been us, the oppressed, who have prevented our total annihilation by waging national liberation struggles to repel pig aggression. The imperialist sponsored race war of colonialism and neocolonialism has the NABPP so dazed and confused that they cannot recognize it for what it is. So they project it instead, instead into the future as if it will almost certainly happen if we struggle for national liberation. That's a manifestation, a symptom of the colonial mentality. Ooh, mama, there go that man again. I'm not sure which comedian that came from, but anyway. We found it curious that they project the almost certain imperialist sponsored race war into the future when Christopher Columbus, sponsored by King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain, certainly imperialist, landed in the Caribbean in 1492. Cortez, da Gama, Pizarro, Magellan, Custer, Pershing, Westmoreland, Schwarzkopf, imperialists have always sponsored colonialist exploits. Trayvon Martin, Oscar Grant, Devin Brown, Lavelle Mixon, MLK, and countless other murders of our nationals can easily attest to the state of our existence now. And we have social development, not to mention gaping holes in our cultures to prove the past. What we do know is that all this will continue if we do nothing, or if we stand around nicely waiting for the very people, the 13% who benefit from our oppression, to unite with us in order to get free. We question with all seriousness the logic in this. We trust we are not alone. Now, the same forces the NABPP attempts to threaten us with, those who the imperialists will sponsor, the NABPP says we should unite with because they, quote, are committed to supporting black, liberation because it serves the cause of liberating all of humanity from imperialism and exploitation. Cue the Benny Hill theme song. Where is self determination in all of this? New Africa is a working class nation with nothing to lose. Why not go deeper into our own nation for support in liberating all of humanity? When did the settlers get so committed to supporting black liberation? The greatest support the settlers who are committed can offer the New African independence movement is to organize their nationals and start taking the fight to their bourgeoisie. That's their responsibility, not uniting with us or any other national liberation struggle. They have to build their own and handle their business. We'll run alliances when necessary, but their obligation is to not be, quote, good Americans, unquote, not be like the Germans who were good Germans during the Nazi Empire, just going right along with their government's genocidal programs because they were beneficial to them. While we appreciate revolutionary solidarity, we first of all question any people as to what they are doing to tear down their ruling class and its machine. That's the criterion for solidarity. And why is that, you ask? Because, quote, in a settler empire, one that is both a prison house of third world nations and peoples, as well as the number one imperialist power, for young revolutionaries to be uncertain about proletarian internationalism inescapably means being in practice uncertain about parasitism, uncertain about solidarity, and so on. And being uncertain means being dead or captured. Radical integration and a blind, godlike allegiance to, quote, super white folks, unquote, who are the only ones capable of helping us get free. If they don't, as the NABPP threatens, kill us all in a race war first, while literally having no faith in ourselves is again a symptom of colonial war mental disorder or the colonial mentality. The only substantial treatment and cure for this is a deeper submersion of oneself into revolutionary consciousness through class suicide and struggle. Anything short of this will only perpetuate the malady. Another quote. Some people talk about a nation, but don't really want to be one, independent, as evidenced by the efforts to crawl back on the plantation. How can we tell? You can identify those trying to crawl onto the plantation by the way they identify themselves, i.e., blacks, Afro Americans, African Americans, foundational black American, American descendant of slavery, ethnic group, minority nationality, national minority, underclass, anything and everything except new Africans, an oppressed nation. America's the plantation, and continuing to identify yourself within the American context is evidence of the colonial slave mentality. Ain't no two ways about it. I was listening to a news program years ago. I was in Birmingham, Alabama, and the newscaster came on TV and was talking about something that happened at an all black high school. And that was the first time I had ever heard the word majority minority. It's a majority minority school. And I was like, what? What the? It actually, what's the word? Synapses? I actually heard my brain snap for a moment. You know how pistons are supposed to fire and then they misfire? I was like, majority minority? What the hell? Anyway, the NABPP says that we new Africans are now a predominantly proletarian nation, and one without a national territory is an advantage to the cause. Wrong again. New Africans have always been a proletarian nation. So much so, in fact, that from 1619 to at least 1865, there was no unemployment in New Africa. No woman, child, or man was exempt. Imagine that. It was called slavery. And while the NABPP says we are without a national territory, the Naim designated Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina as the national territory. as early as 1968. Quote, on March 28th, 1971, 150 new Africans held a nation-time ceremony consecrating bleh, consecrating 20 acres of newly purchased land just west of Jackson, Mississippi. The land was designated as the future capital of the nation, named El Malik or Malik, after Malcolm X El Haj Malik Shabazz. 15 new citizens took the nation oath. President Imari Obadele officiated at a new African wedding ceremony. Uniformed men and women of the Black Legion, the regular military of the Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa, patrolled the perimeter with rifles. Educational workshops, a meeting of the PGRNA's People's Center Council, and other ceremonies filled the day. I did a show, you can find it here on Rootwork on Black Liberation Media, with Kalia Kuno. I'm not sure if Kamal Franklin was on, but definitely with Kalia Kuno. We were talking about there was a video, a movie, a documentary. It was brief, based upon Charles Blow's book, The Devil You Know. So many people now are talking about moving back to the South. This is in 2024, 2025, 26, because we are a majority in many counties, many cities of the South. That has remained a constant. That area of quote unquote New Africa, or I will go ahead and say it, the Black Belt area, we remain either in the majority or full of substantial numbers in those areas. So, again, as Yaki pointed out, for us, there's never been a question, only a task, a goal. The NABPP says that in 1978, our struggle for land was revived by the production of Harry Haywood's Black Belt Thesis. And yet again, and yet in Black August of 1977, the New African Prisoners Organization wrote, this piece was purposefully concentrated on defining the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments as instruments of national oppression because we believe that this is not only the most correct conception, but also because we believe this will contribute to raising the level of national consciousness among new African people and consequently to successful revolutionary nationalist war, a war for the independence of new African people, a war to regain the national territory, a war which will lead to the establishment of sovereignty for New Africa and its socialist development. I need to read out loud more often. I be reading to myself in my mind. You read out loud, your vocal cords get dry. Taking another swig of juice. No gin. We repeat, this is from 1977. Our eyes have never left the prize. So, we have a national territory. It's just in the radical integrationist politics of the NABPP to first disagree that this is so, then to attempt to distort this reality, and failing that, to use deception through omission. Why, you may ask, would they do that? Well, according to them, new Africans being, quote, without a national territory is an advantage to the cause of building a multi-ethnic, multiracial, socialist America. And there it is, radical reformist integration. It is in their interest to disagree, distort, and omit the facts in this regard, which is why we believe that this piece on the so called national question, while titled Black Liberation in the 21st Century, actually contributes little, if anything, towards a revolutionary reassessment of black nationalism. It wasn't meant to do any such thing. It was designed to propagate radical, i.e., reformist, integration. We in the Naim were simply a handy target. If radical integration is their thing, well, that's their thing. They could very well have put forth their line without dragging us into it. If that's your bag, push it. We'll push ours. Ultimately, the masses will decide which line best suits their aspirations. But the NABPP has to come out with an attack on our line in their headlong rush in search of some imaginary, quote, multi ethnic, multiracial, unquote, mass to lead. But wait, hmm, where have we heard this before? Digging in the crates. Oh, yeah, here it is. When the U.S. empire vamped on the BPP, and they were, despite their intentions, unable to defend themselves, the party's strategy had failed. A new strategy was adopted. The Oakland BPP leadership turned to their natural ally, the Euro American petty bourgeoisie. The party leadership didn't turn to the new African proletariat because they neither knew how to organize the nation nor did they really trust their own people. Their neo colonial class unity with the white petty bourgeoisie came to the front in the crisis. This was justified as some kind of internationalism, of supposedly winning needed allies to the liberation movement. I think, let me see if I can hold on, what page was I on? I think I was I'm page 29. No, that ain't it. That's listed as footnote 64, and that makes me want to go and find the footnote of that particular. Yep, Tani and Sarah. But I'm not sure. Oh, okay. Curse Blair. I wish. Yeah, this isn't going to work. He quotes Tani and Sarah, and I don't know which book that is. I'll get back to that later. But yeah, you can find uh, a PDF if you don't already own the book, or if you would like to own the book and support some authors that way, support folks that way, then you will be able to follow along with the various footnotes. Okay, so I couldn't find what that footnote was. But wait, there's more. The Oakland leadership has become committed to uniting with the settler petty bourgeoisie, if necessary, and it was, against their own national movement and against their former comrade. Ooh, shots fired. Somebody wrote that. Okay. The NABPP does another sleight of hand deception. Let me stop. 6:49. We are way behind. We have done 2 hours on one chapter. I'm going to finish this chapter and then we're going to see about Safiya. Anyway, the NABPP does another sleight of hand deception by omission when it speaks about Chairman Fred Hampton of the Chicago chapter of the BPP, attempting to pass off his Rainbow Coalition as a paradigm for radical integration because there was an alliance with Mexicanos, Puerto Ricans, Americans, and New Africans. Here's what the NABPP conveniently failed to mention. The Brown Berets were a Chicano nationalist organization struggling to free their nation of Aztlan, northern Mexico, California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and Nevada. The Young Lords organization were Puerto Rican independentistas struggling for the independence of their homeland. The New Africans in the party at that time were still functioning under the party's first line of New African nationalism. The settlers were struggling for a socialist America. So it was an alliance of forces struggling for the national liberation of their respective productive forces, not to get together and sing kumbaya. In the 70s, things broke down, but when Chairman Fred was still alive, and in 1968 69, this was the deal. Oh my! Oh, uh, please tell me I'm coming toward the end. Page 30. Is that the end? Yes. Whew, Lord have mercy, Jesus. I think I got one more page. No need for a nation state? Oh man, come on. Text spicy. No. No need for a nation state. I'm almost there. Almost there. In a disturbingly blind-eyed distraction, the NABPP says, quote, without need of pursuing a struggle to achieve a new African nation state, we have achieved the historical results of bourgeois democracy, at least as far as transforming ourselves from a peasant to a predominantly proletarian national grouping through the Great Migration. What? Again, we can't make this stuff up, folks. We've always felt a need to pursue a new African nation state. The struggle on our side of the line has always been about freedom, land, independence, self-determination, and socialism. In the New African Creed, we find the following quote: Number 3, I believe in the community as more important than the individual. Number 4, I believe in constant struggle for freedom to end oppression and build a better world. I believe in collective struggle and fashioning victory in concert with my brothers and sisters. Number 5, I believe that the fundamental reason our oppression continues is that we as a people lack the power to control our lives. Number 6, I believe that the fundamental way to gain that power and end oppression is to build a sovereign black nation. Okay, there we go. We have continuously pursued the need for a nation state. The fact that we erected a provisional government in 1968 should be testament enough. The fact of the matter is, there has always been, as in all things, a two-line struggle in our nation. There's been a struggle to get out, free and independent of the empire, and another to get in to reform and wield the power of the empire. That now we're faced with radical integrationism in drag, as some crackpot theory called intercommunalism, doesn't change the twin essence of the two-line struggle. This is nothing new. The NABPP goes on to say, we have achieved the historical results of bourgeois democracy. We have? Now wait, is it bourgeois democracy or neocolonialism? See, here's the very real difference in ideology. It is, as Comrade Yaqui would say, quote, the contradiction surfacing and sharpening, end quote. If we are a part of a multi-ethnic, multiracial national grouping, as the NABPP says, then yes, we have achieved bourgeois democracy. That is, after all, what multi-ethnics get. You know, like the settler, garrison citizens of empire who come from Europe, or perhaps Oprah, Jordan, Rock Bottom, and Wilson Good. They get and can enjoy bourgeois democracy. That's the velvet glove. The masses of the oppressed nations The internal colonies, New Africa, Puerto Rico, Aslan, and indigenous, well, we get the good old iron fist of neocolonialism, casino freedom, Commonwealth hegemony, barrio blues, and ghetto prisons. But of course, since we've had such success in transforming ourselves from a peasant to a predominantly proletarian national grouping, it's what, better now? No, it's, quote, an advantage to the cause of building a multi ethnic, multiracial, socialist America, end quote. What a wonderful thing, huh? Hey, here's a novel idea. Why not all the internal colonies struggle to free the land, and we break the empire apart, like what happened with the USSR empire? Too complicated? Comrade Stalin wouldn't approve? Internationalism, real or false? In a stunning turn in their already wildly contradictory and inconsistent phraseology, the NABPP says there are many white comrades, communists, socialists, anarchists, and progressives who are committed to supporting black liberation because it serves the cause of liberating all of humanity from imperialism and because it strengthens the workers' movement. If these comrades are communists, socialists, anarchists, or progressives, whatever that is, why would the NABPP feel a need to tell us their complexion? What would their so called color have to do with anything if they were comrades? See how subtle that is? It's like a magic spell. White comrades. That's that colonial mentality bleeding through. That which has the NABPP hypnotized is what they attempt to hypnotize others with. It's a subtle whimper that squeaks. We can make it now. The dominant culture, mighty whitey, is with us. And the comrades in the NABPP may not even be altogether aware of this, but it is what it is. If there are communists, socialists, anarchists, and progressives, what the hell is that? Who are Americans, Canadians, or French, English, Irish, or German, who are committed to supporting black liberation, then the best way to do that is to organize your people and attack your ruling class. If you got any extra weapons, slide them our way, please. But having to explain that these comrades are white says more about the NABPP than it does about those who want to help. Isn't it strange how this so called position on the national question is called a revolutionary reassessment of black nationalism? But the NABPP is the main one clinging to terms which reinforce the false construct of race, like white and black. And what about the fact that when it's national liberation, it's unbelieving square, excuse me, it's unbelieving scare quotes on liberation, but when it's about white comrades who are committed to supporting black liberation, the unbelieving scare quotes miraculously vanish. All of a sudden, black liberation is something to support? What's also puzzling, the NABPP says the white comrades are committed to supporting black liberation because it serves the cause of liberating all of humanity from imperialism and because it strengthens the white workers' movement. We'd hate to come off as nitpicking, but what workers' movement? Does anyone else smell that? Check this out. Quote, there are many individual Euro American workers, but they do not make up a genuine proletariat. That is, settler workers are a non exploited labor aristocracy with a privileged lifestyle far, far above the levels of the world proletariat. They might be called a pseudo proletariat in that individual settlers do work in factories and mines, but as a group, They do not perform the role of a proletariat. Settler workers neither support their society by their labor, nor is their exploitation the source of the surplus value or profit that sustains the U.S. bourgeoisie. The life giving role of the proletariat in the U.S. empire is relegated to the proletarians of the oppressed nations, which is why, quote, nations become almost as classes, unquote, under imperialism. The shrinking number of settler workers actually live as part of the lower petty bourgeoisie and have no separate political existence. Classes in the U.S. empire themselves reflect the primary contradiction between imperialism and the oppressed nations. No wonder the NABPP says the settlers will support us. It strengthens the workers' movement and, furthermore, the cause of uniting the black liberation struggle with the proletarian class struggle is a step towards the total liberation of humanity and the whole world becoming one people. Now it's the black liberation struggle. What would that struggle be for? Pursuing a nation state, maybe? Land? So we are to forego our struggle for land independence and socialism to unite with who? The proletarian class. We are the proletarians. And how about that liberation of humanity and the whole world becoming one people? White folks sure are powerfully magic, ain't they? Yes, sir. Mighty powerful. Hat in hand, staring off into the distance, mouth agape like an idiot. This is radical and at times comical integration. It's more of what we've always had. Nothing new here. No groundbreaking great leap forward. We'll close out with a quote by a comrade in hopes of some receptive ear feeling the vibrations of revolutionary nationalism. Dig this. The key to the destruction of the empire lies steering within it, not outside. The head and heart, brain and nerves, all vital organs essential to the perpetuation of life, are all inside, not outside. What will be critical, what is fundamental and essential for the initiation of a socialist world is the eventual liberation of New Africa and other oppressed nations inside the belly of the American empire. Not 1917 or 1978 Russia, not 1949 or 1978 China, not Cuba, Vietnam, Mozambique, Angola, Zimbabwe, or Azania, not Brazil, Chile, neither of these nor any other place outside the belly of the empire will alone or together truly free the world from the grips and threats of American capitalism, imperialism, colonialism, or neocolonialism. They may help, they will cause change of conditions and create a climate offering greater potential, higher probabilities, and increased chances of success, but not until the head and heart, brain and nerves, until the vital organs are destroyed. The empire will simply readjust, reform, make new alliances. It will change form, but it will live so long as New Africa is subjugated, so long as Puerto Rico is a colony or a neo-colony, so long as native nations don't have sovereignty over their lives and lands. lands and lives, excuse me. The struggle is for land, independence, and socialism. We'll see you in the whirlwind. My voice has gone into the whirlwind. Woo! All right. I have 7:05 p.m. and I'm supposed to go to 7:30. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. What y'all think? What y'all think? Yeah, I'm on Pacific time, so that means it's 10:06 on the East Coast, and I'm supposed to stop at 10:30. Yeah, so I didn't realize how long it was gonna take. Yeah, that was hey, I agree. That was a deep chapter. That brother, like I said last week, that brother graduated from the 6th grade, and that may have been the last time he stepped forth into a classroom. But it obviously was not the last time he picked up a book, taught himself, like so many other folks do once they are captured and in the penal system. Brilliant, brilliant brother, passed away in 2021. Still had demons. He was working with Sanyika Shakur. Some people say he died as Monster Kody, not Sanyika Shakur. I think that's 5 years ago. I think I think I have pretty much stopped being mad at him for dying. I'm still very hurt by it. That was my brother. That was my brother, my homie. I wish he should still be here. I wish he was still here. I want him still here. But he left us 3 books and numerous video, interviews, snippets, etc. So I think what I'm going to do, some folks are going to have to check out, I understand. I think what I'm going to do for the folks that want to hang out, but also who come in here later, I think what I'm going to do is go into this next chapter, one chapter of Safiya Bukhari, and at least it will be here. And yeah, that's what I think I'm going to do. But I'm going to take a quick break, though, get some more juice without gin, and be right back. All right? Now, y'all hold on. I'm going to take a quick break and be right back. right. All right. That's back. Let's see. Let me see here. Yeah, that was a deep chapter. Tremendous. You are welcome. Y'all with it, huh? Okay. All right. All right. You with it? All right. Later, comrades. Appreciate you. Appreciate you. Appreciate you. Understand you got to go. Yeah, me too. I like a little, I'm digging in my crates, finding the stuff that brings me joy, makes me move a little bit. Thought I'd incorporate it. You know what I mean? Nah, I mean. All right. Let's see here. I'm going to share my screen and I am going to go into this third chapter of the writings of Safiya Bukhari, The War Before. This is from her book, The War Before. This is the marriage contract between Safiya Bukhari and Michael M. Ashanti Alston. Ashanti Alston, former, or should I say retired, member of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, retired soldier of the Black Liberation Army, former prisoner of war. A book of his writings is now available from AK Press entitled Anarchist Panther. Anarchist, or as we say in New Africa, anarchist. No, let me stop. Anarchist Panther, the Ebonics, the AAVE, the New African English. All right, let's start. This is a note from the editor of Safiya's book, Laura Whitehorn. Safiya and Ashanti were legally married in 1984 by the Muslim chaplain at the prison where Ashanti was incarcerated. After Ashanti's release in 1985, he and Safiya drew up this marriage contract. It was never intended to be a legal document, Ashanti says, but was created because we wanted something in writing, something that we were consciously agreeing to show what this marriage would mean and what we'd do if we had difficulties. We wanted to act consciously instead of just getting married and saying everything is going to be lovely. We knew that kind of thinking isn't realistic. We already knew that from what had happened during the split in the Panthers. The marriage itself lasted only a few years, though the two did not divorce and remain partners in order to care for Safiya's daughter Wanda and granddaughter Shilas. The party of the first part, hereinafter known as Safiya Bukhari, and the party of the second part, hereinafter known as Michael Maurice Alston, do consent and agree to abide by the following contractual agreement, to wit: the basis for the continuation. Oh God, that looks horrible. I'm trying to see how. I hope y'all are zooming in on your screen. I'm trying to. I'm trying to do what I can for y'all. Yeah, okay. The basis for the continuation of this relationship, commonly known as a marriage, is and will continue to be a common desire and commitment to the struggle for the liberation of oppressed people wherever they may be found. It is understood that if at any time either of the parties reneges upon this commitment, the relationship is subject to dissolution. It's probably reneges. Anyway, number two, that the relationship is a partnership based on equality, autonomy, mutual respect, mutual trust, respect, love, companionship, friendship, and freedom. Number three, that we work to promote the health and welfare of our family unit so that we develop our social skills to be successful in reaching personal and collective goals. Number four, that we will dare to be honest and courageous in giving of ourselves so that our relationship becomes and remains a safe haven, a source of joy, and a place to unfold grander human qualities. that whenever contradictions arise that threaten to become antagonistic in nature, we will use the principles of constructive conflict resolution to remedy the situation. If at such time the contradictions have reached a stage where they cannot be resolved without outside mediation or intervention, then we agree to give each other space and seek the guidance of friends, comrades, or professional counseling to alleviate and diffuse the situation, with the understanding that all of us are human and subject to human frailties. Number 6, if it ever reaches the point where we decide to end or sever our relationship, we will remain, redevelop friendship and comradeship. The foregoing is agreed to willingly and without compulsion or duress. Signed, M. Ashanti Alston, Safiya Bukhari, November 18th, 1985. Now, I had said I wasn't going to go into this next chapter. I'm wondering how long it is. That don't seem long, but hey, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to give it a shot. And we're going to see where it takes us. Chapter 4 of Safiya Bukhari's The War Before. What is Security? And the Ballot or the Bullet Revisited. This essay is undated. It was probably written in the mid-1990s. The Sun Tzu quote is in the original. The essay seems to have been written by Safiya in her capacity as a member of the Republic of New Africa. That would be in her capacity as a... Safiya was a vice president of the provisional government of the Republic of New Africa. People shorten it and call it the RNA when they're talking about the government and the officials. And really, it should be that you're talking about the actual land is the RNA, Republic of New Africa. And the people, like the president or whoever, they're officials in the PG, the provisional government of the Republic of New Africa, i.e. the PG or the PGRNA. Anyway, in this essay and others, Safiya grappled with the significance of COINTELPRO. What did it mean for organizers? How could the damage to relationships and organizations be repaired? And how could similar rifts be avoided in the future? While some survivors of the COINTELPRO years drew grim lessons that encouraged them to drop out of political activism, Safiya drew different conclusions. Her realization of the lengths to which the government and law enforcement would go to extinguish the challenge of Black liberation only fueled her determination to continue organizing. See, if you know what you're doing, spite can be a very powerful tool. But, it's not for children. It's for grown folks only. Anyway, know yourself and know your enemies, and in 1,000 battles, you'll never be defeated. That's a quote from Sun Tzu, The Art of War. The word security most often brings to mind a uniformed person presenting an image of authority and sending out, I'm in control, and don't mess with me, I'm bad, and don't even think about it signals. The next thing people usually think about and do is to go into the basic training, calisthenics, and technical training, weapons mode. While this has passed for security, it's on a very superficial level. Once you dig a little past the obvious, it usually proves to be no real security at all. By definition, security means the freedom from danger, fear, and anxiety. Individual and organizational safety and well-being begin with the knowledge of what you're about, what the organization is about, your limitations, the organization's limitations, your strengths, and the organization's strengths. Knowledge is the key to security. History has shown that the best security depends upon the internal strength of the organization and the internal principles of the people who make up the organization. Inherent in the creed of the Republic of New Africa is a line that says, I will steal nothing from a brother or sister, cheat no brother or sister, misuse no brother or sister, inform on no brother or sister, and spread no gossip. This is an extremely important component of individual and organizational security. The knowledge that the person next to you, the person working beside you, will not cheat you or lie and spread gossip about you is the basis for your feeling secure in your environment or within your organization. The ability to trust your comrades implicitly and to know with certainty what they will do in any circumstance is the best security. The question then is, how do we get to this point? It begins with knowing what you're about, what you want, and what you believe in, and how far you will go to obtain it. The reciprocal reality is knowing what the organization is about. If the purpose and mission of the organization is clear, not subject to interpretation, then people joining will not be able to say that they thought the organization was about one thing when they joined, only to find out later that it was about something totally different. This means that both the individual and the organization need to be open and honest. My rule of thumb is, if the police know, the people should know. The history of COINTELPRO shows that the enemy will use anything and everything they know about you to their advantage. If there are no, quote, dirty little secrets, unquote, that the enemy can drop in the media or tell your next door neighbor or your comrades, then we have managed to take one weapon from them. Somewhere out there in the world is a video of James Baldwin talking about how in the 1950s he said, "Yeah, yes, I'm a homosexual. Yes, I'm gay. See, I told you." So now there's nothing to hide. Somebody can't come back later on and try and use that against them. That's basically what he was saying. So that video is out there. As we shed the ego and survive all the knocks of revealing these little truths about ourselves to one another, we become stronger. Our organization becomes stronger and more secure, and our goal becomes realizable because we have begun to sublimate the big I to the collective us or we. An example of, quote, what the police know, the people should know, quote, is the social security number. We give this number to anybody who asks for it. The credit card agency when we apply for a card, the employer, the school, anybody that is, except the organization that we believe will lead us to liberation. Then there's our telephone number. The government can obtain it at will. They bug it, they get copies of our phone bills, they own it, but we don't want to give it to each other. In application after application, we tell them our mother's maiden name, how many siblings we have, our children's names, and social security numbers, where we work and how long we've worked there, where we live and how long we've lived there, and where we lived before that. We voluntarily give up this information because there's something we want in return. Then there's the information they get through investigating or surveilling us. They find out who our friends and associates are, what organizations we belong to, and which ones we used to belong to. They find out whether we have a criminal record and where we went to school. They find out our Lord have mercy, reading out loud. They find out our sexual liaisons and even some of our proclivities. They know our religious background. They know whom we owe what to and how much we're in debt. The enemy knows all this, and what they don't know already, they investigate and make every effort to find out. We're left at the gate. What's wrong with this picture? The root word of security is secure. Inherent in this is feeling protected, safe, guarded. This is all based on the trust we have in the entity or organization with which we are working, or the people we have around us. If we trust them, we feel secure. Is the fact that we readily reveal information about ourselves to the U.S. government and its agencies a statement of our trust in the U.S. government or the credit card bureaus, landlords, and places where we apply to work? Is the fact that we do not feel secure giving the same information to the organizations or people we work with a sign of our lack of trust in them? The basic element of security is trust. Without trust, there is no security. Trust comes through knowing and believing that you're safe within a specific area, whether it's a company of people or the confines of a building. When the creed of the Republic of New Africa says, I will steal nothing from a brother or sister, cheat no brother or sister, misuse no brother or sister, inform on no brother and sister, and spread no gossip, the citizens of the RNA know that they can trust that this will in fact be the policy of the provisional government, PGRNA. This security in the knowledge that the PGRNA will protect its citizens will go a long way toward providing for the security of the provisional government. What about self-defense? Now that we've established what security really is and put this level of security into practice, the rest becomes much easier. Our provisional government takes on the character of a liberated zone, a place where we feel secure and where we can carry out the task of freeing the land. Within the framework of this liberated zone, the organizations that make up the New African Independence Movement, or NAIM, can begin to develop security units to protect our communities from outside elements harmful to our people. The first element of this is self-defense training. Every element of defense begins with self. We must be able to defend ourselves. The first step is being in shape. Well, I've lost that battle. For years, following my incarceration, I had gained a lot of weight and felt incapable of losing it. I was very unhealthy and unable to defend myself. I felt vulnerable and worried about being able to defend anyone else. Finally, I decided I had to get myself Bleh. Finally, I decided I had to get myself in shape and under control. I had to lose the weight and get myself into a position where I could defend my community and myself again. Once the weight began to come off, I started to exercise and practice martial arts again. I'm still not where I should be, but my confidence in my abilities is rising again, and I am feeling more secure. That's where it has to start. I recommend that we all begin to take stock of ourselves and take care of ourselves. Our internal security depends on how much we're capable of defending ourselves. Personal self-defense training, such as martial arts training, can be obtained in a number of ways. We can use the expertise of people from within to set up training for our groups, or we can take classes at outside dojos. Either way is okay. We just have to develop and maintain the discipline to carry through on our objectives. This kind of training boosts our confidence in ourselves as well. What about community defense? Defending our communities from outside forces is a natural outgrowth of self-defense. Building trust within ourselves and our organization and the provisional government makes it easier to build our defense effort. Let's lay the foundation by making that security real so that we can move forward, developing our community, building our national defense effort, and advancing to free the land. The ballot or the bullet revisited. Debating whether to work within the system using the electoral process to achieve equality or to work outside the system using armed struggle to achieve liberation is tantamount to comparing apples and onions. The initial premise that the question of whether electoral politics or armed struggle within the context of the liberation of people of African descent is debatable is erroneous. The initial premise is erroneous. A debate poses two sides of the same question, one another: equality, uniformity, conformity, likeness, and liberation, deliverance, emancipation, freedom are not the same. In order to understand the issues, we must understand the language. The bottom line is that we can no longer assume that we're all striving for the same thing. Equality simply means that you want the same thing, same privileges, same access to things that the next person, the person with whom you seek to be equal, has. Freedom means you want the ability to determine for yourself, without social and political pressures, tainted as they are by racism, how you want to live your life and what you want to achieve for your family and community. How do you know if you how do you know if you've achieved equality? Can you ever achieve equality? Now, freedom is different. When you have the power to determine your destiny, you have achieved freedom. It's as simple as that. When El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, Malcolm X, posed the question of the ballot or the bullet, he raised it in the context of the struggle for our freedom. The concept was that we would either win our freedom using the ballot or we would take it with the bullet. The choice was up to the system. What would be possible and how? What do we visualize? What is our goal? And unlike Sanyika's book, I can actually see these footnotes. So the next chapter, Enemies and Friends, Resolving Contradictions, that will be next week. And I think I am going to lead off with Safiya next week because I love my brother Sanyika, but either he or I am too long-winded. Somebody, somebody doing too much. But yeah, only because it's now 7:33, 2 hours and 33 minutes, and I try not to keep y'all, that long. I'm actually in a decent place. I had my Advil, so Mr. Arthritis is not knocking on the door. But like I said, for y'all people on the East Coast, it's 10:30 at night. You don't want to be hanging out with me. You got to get ready for tomorrow. You got to do whatever it is you do on a Sunday night. I know I got to go watch House of the Dragon. Yes, I have to go watch House of the Dragon. So we got through chapter three, the third chapters of both books today: Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur and The War Before by Safiya Bukhari. We will be starting with the fourth chapter of both works next week. Um, like I said, I didn't know it was going to take this long. So it's a possibility that we will not be finishing these books, or I will not be finishing these books in August. But never fear, that just means we're going to roll into September. So we're going to finish these books. They just might not be finished during Black August, but they definitely going to be finished. Finished. Thank you, Amilcar, for stopping through. Thank you, Michael, for stopping through. Appreciate y'all for hanging with a sister. Really, 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 really do. Yeah, not quite sure why they should have the Social Security number. Yeah, me neither. But yeah, I get the point that she's making. But yeah, it's like these First Amendment auditors that I watch. Uh, They're like, you got a problem with me standing on the sidewalk, recorded you. You just left a building full of cameras. What is your problem? I mean, uh, they could say it in a nicer way, in a more helpful. They could give a more helpful explanation. But that's their basic point, is that every time you leave your house, there's a camera trained on you. You haven't said a word about that, but you mad about me standing on here standing on the sidewalk as you go into the weed dispensary. That was a very good chapter on security. Thank you so much. You have a good evening also. All of y'all, thank you for coming through and hanging with me. Again, please like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Tomorrow is Monday. We start another week and we do it all again here on Black Liberation Media. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. As usual, appreciate y'all. Thank you for hanging with me. Catch you all on the next one. Peace.
Nothing in Deborah Jones's formative years could have prepared her for life in the US organization. Like many of her generation, she was Black and proud before the phrase became popular. She believed, and still believes, in the principles for which the organization stood. But her life took a horrific turn on Mother's Day 1970, leaving her in trauma and in silence. In this never-before-told account, Deborah Jones's inspiring story is told. What We Stood For: The Story of a Revolutionary Black Woman, by Deborah Jones and Thandisizwe Chimurenga, is the compelling and harrowing memoir of one woman's experiences in a leading Black Power organization.
Black Liberation Media is a collective of Black and African organizers, journalists, academics, and media personalities serving Black and African masses seeking to further grow in their understanding of themselves, their histories, and the African world through entertainment and news. Please continue to like, subscribe, and donate to the channel so we can further serve you and liberate our people. You can also go to blkliberationmedia.org, get some merchandise, and also become a Patreon member and a member from the YouTube. Please do what you can, share, and show your love as we will show ours for you. Black Liberation Media.